Hi everyone and welcome back to my vlog. Today it's all about Mark Alexander-Erber. I featured him in the Iron Duke Hotel Alexandria vlog that I recently uploaded. Now that particular hotel was Mark's first pub boy, pub. He went on to own about 30 pubs after that. Then he kind of had a break and moved into tattoo shops and coffee shops. And then something happened that kind of really changed his career trajectory where his son Jagger nearly won a contest, a talent contest. And look, I guess, in the frustration of trying to find a record label to represent him, Mark thought it was a great idea to, form his own, and that company is Golden Robot Records, which, a very smart move because over time, it's just proven to be this dynamic and really globally recognised and respected company. Lots and lots of clients, Faster Pussycat, Rose Tattoo, Gilby Clarke, Devo, Johnny Thunders. So Mark, talks about that in the vlog. And as much as he might be studying to be a lawyer now, and he's, put Golden Robot Records to the side because it kind of looks after itself. I just found it a really, really interesting time talking to Mark about his time at the Iron Duke and lots of other interesting topics. Mark Alexander-Erber, thank you for joining me on my vlog. Yeah, I wanted to reach out to you because I know you were involved with the Iron Duke in Alexandria. When and how did you get involved?
Well, I did about 15 years working in five-star hotels from the mid-'80s all the way up to about 97. And my last post at the Regent, which was now the Four Seasons in the Rocks in Sydney, was in a pub out the front. And I ran that pub for many years. And the general manager one day called me Pub Boy. And I thought, well, that's a good name. So I went and registered that. And when I was coming to the end of my tenure there, I thought, oh, I really want to get into pubs. I want to buy a pub.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up buying the lease of the Iron Duke in around May 1997.
Mm-hmm.
I always had big plans for it, and they had a somewhat of a music schedule going, but nothing really massive. Took it over from May 97. I think it was actually the 9th of May 97. I don't know why I remember that, but I
Mm-hmm.
do. We quickly, through some contact, through some other things, we started doing music 7 nights a week. I paid a bit of money to a couple of bookers and started to put myself in a position where I got to know the people at Harbour, the big agency, threw a bit of money their way and, gave them a little bit of a cut off the door, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I started getting some pretty good bands through there. And we started making a bit of a reputation name for ourselves. So I kitted it out very rock and roll with pictures on the walls and old Cramps posters that were framed and all these, bits and pieces. So it had a really good vibe. Did I have poker machines? I don't even remember. I ended up owning about 30 hotels after that. And this was my first one. I don't think we had pokies. I can't remember. Maybe we did. But I concentrated on the food. We had a big beer garden. And then we started getting the punk scene involved and the hardcore scene involved. And we started doing these weekends called, Hardcore Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And started getting bands like Toe to Toe in. The original versions of Silverchair, Magic Dirt, Eskimo Joe played there on a Wednesday night. At the same time, there was other venues like the Annandale going on, and we were making it really hard for the Annandale. They ended up changing management and ownership, and they ended up closing. So the Iron Duke started taking over the scene. And then we ended up culminating in the Deftones playing there 3 nights. I remember I think it was like a Friday night and a Saturday and then a Sunday all ages gig. And that absolutely put us on the map for a real incredible venue. And as I said, I went on to create Pub Boy, and that was the first pub in the chain. And then I went on, as I said, for another 15 years and bought about 30 more pubs. But I still, to this day, all those years later, still get pulled up about the Iron Duke. People that had a memory from the Iron Duke or went to the Iron Duke, they still talk about the Iron Duke from 97 to 99 till today. It's quite incredible how it still resonates with people. I'm very proud of what we achieved there.
I think you should be. I have quite a few drum media street press, and I
Yeah.
happen to have a lot of 97, 98, 99.
Oh, yeah.
went through some of them looking for all those ads, and you also used to have little,
Yeah,
updates, and they were fantastic. Some of what
I
the
think
things
I
that you
called it
wrote.
the 2 cent opinion or something. I
Yeah,
remember.
I was really impressed with the bands that I saw advertised. So the Australian ones like the New Christs,
Yeah,
Asteroid B612, the Cosmic Psychos played there. Heartside Killers, the Hard-Ons, and then I saw all the international ones like the Deftones, as you said, bands like the Helicopters and that.
yep,
I think it was the Southern Culture on Skids.
yep,
Being able to put on a band like the Deftones in that venue,
yeah.
to me as a punter, I think it's just amazing when I think back to certain venues where I was able to see those bigger bands in a smaller, more intimate kind of environment.
Look, that was obviously the beginning of them when they had their first album out on
Yeah.
Maverick, which was Madonna's label. The one thing that set us apart, and we weren't just a venue. I ran that although I owned it, I ran it 7 days a week myself,
Mhm,
and for 2 years. And because I'd come from five-star hotels, we
mhm,
really looked after everybody. So when the Deftones were there, I would make sure that they looked okay. We would have people help them with their gear in. We would help people load out. I brought this sort of better service quality. It was really, I was trained in five-star, so I'd come straight from that environment. So, even when we looked at, you go into a pub these days and you look in the fridge and everything's all over the place.
mm,
All our bottles were in the right order.
yeah,
Everything was clean and tidy. Our toilets were tidy. The music we had, the sound was top quality. The stage was well done.
mm,
Everything was a sum of its own parts.
yeah,
And that made a difference, and people had a good experience there. We didn't, get rough with anyone. If there was a problem, we talked them out, and it was just this overall great environment for a couple of
mm,
years. And as I said, that was the springboard into me then starting a chain of hotels, and then from
mm,
that I ended up setting up Golden Robot Records and Golden Robot Global Entertainment. And over the last 10 years, to actually 12 years, I've released about 1,000 albums
wow,
through Golden Robot globally. However, it's funny you mention a lot of those bands because I just did an Asteroid B612 album, their new one. They're
mhm,
actually touring Australia at the moment.
yeah,
I
they
did a
are.
Hard Ons album. So a lot of the bands that I worked with in those days, we've ended up either signing or doing an album with. Like we've got the whole of the Asteroids back catalogue.
Oh, how
Uh, I got
cool.
we got heaps of music. So a
Yeah,
lot of those bands I've ended up working again with. Under the guise of a record label and an
mm,
international record label. So it's funny how it comes full circle. I mean, John Spittles, who's Johnny Casino,
mm,
who is Asteroid B612, and as I said, they're touring
yeah,
right now in Australia. I've known him for now 30 years.
wow.
It's crazy.
Wow, that is crazy. Yeah, they were on this weekend actually. Were there challenges regarding noise complaints and neighbours back then?
No, 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 not back then. We were sort of a little bit ahead of our time out there. The advantage was it was more of an industrial area. It had a
Yes,
McDonald's opposite, but
yeah.
other than that, the explosion of apartments hadn't happened yet. Green Square hadn't happened. We had a courtesy bus that would take people in and out. So although we were a little bit more remote, which was great, so you could play till all hours of the morning and you didn't have noise complaints,
Mm,
then on the flip side, there was no local residents really to drop in and have a beer. It was only the people that worked in the area and the people that came there for the music. So
mm.
it had its pluses and minuses. But if you did it today, it'd be an absolute nightmare.
Well,
It'd be a nightmare.
I called them actually yesterday, and it was just a lady at the bar, I think, and I just asked her, do they have music, and if so, are there challenges? And she actually says, "Oh no, we don't have live bands here. We've got apartments next door, and there were complaints, so we actually stopped doing them."
Yeah, look, that's right. It's a funny story because
Yeah.
I know the person. I actually ended up owning a few pubs with him later,
Oh,
who
okay,
owns
yeah,
the development behind or above it. So yeah, you couldn't have that. You couldn't
yeah,
have it. The Iron Duke's reputation was only 97 to 99,
yeah, yeah.
maybe late 99. After that, that was over. So the reputation that it's got today is from 25 years ago.
Wow, wow.
They've never done anything with it since then. It was always known as the Sydney CBGBs. Um, or the Whiskey of Sydney. But it's 25 years ago. They've never really done anything there.
From 95 to 97, I know that in America they had a lot of the hardcore bands going off, and Australian
Yeah.
bands were getting into it, you know, Toe to Toe and
We had Madball. We
yeah.
had a lot of. It's funny. My son now who's 22, who wasn't obviously he wasn't born until 2003. Was after
Yeah.
that. He's one of the top. He's probably one of the best drummers in the world, and he's in a couple of punk bands now.
Is that Jagger?
And yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I read about him and I remember him. I remember him on the show.
yeah. Australia's Got Talent. That's right. He's in that scene now, and there's a lot of old heads in that scene still, and they
Yeah.
talk to him a lot and very fondly about the Iron Duke,
Oh,
knowing he's my son. So yeah, it definitely had its place in time,
yeah,
and it's
totally.
definitely I can definitely say that when I look back at my own career of the different things that I'm doing.
Mm,
And these days, obviously, Golden Robot takes care of itself, and I'm actually studying law. So I've got a whole new career ahead of me being a lawyer. However, yeah, I'm definitely proud of those days and
yeah.
what we achieved in those days.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you kind of came in and I feel like it kind of exploded. But I think a lot of that might have even had to do with two things. A, your passion,
Definitely.
and B, your marketing skills. I think
Yeah.
you do need to know what you're doing. You got to make so
Well,
many people happy.
yeah, look, marketing skills is always something that I've prided
Mm,
myself on, even with Golden Robot and Pub Boy. After that, I mean, that was the first Pub Boy pub. So I'd have a sign out the front saying, "Welcome to another Pub Boy hotel,"
mhm.
although it was the only one. It sounded like it was more, and so we always acted as if it was before we were big. The marketing was always, well, you can see from those ads the way we marketed and what
Mm,
we did, and when there wasn't music playing, I don't remember some of the stuff we did, but Tuesdays always had a theme and Wednesdays had a
yeah.
theme, and we had Pub Boy written on our glasses,
Mm,
schooner glasses, and they'd nick all those, and then as I said, then I ended up buying pubs in the country, but it was really how I cut my teeth. See, when I was at the Four Seasons or the Regent,
mm,
if something went wrong, there was a globe out, or we needed to order something, you'd pick up a phone and there'd be someone else to do it for you.
mm,
But when I hit the Iron Duke in '97, that was my first pub, so you had to do everything yourself.
yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to work out how old I would have been. I was born in '68, 28,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think I read you were 28 when you first
Yeah,
opened it.
so
Wow.
that was young, and although I'd had experience, I
Mm,
was still naive in a lot of ways. But it was also the Iron Duke. I say that it got its reputation in music, '97 and '99 when I owned it. However, it had a reputation way before that for a whole lot different reasons, and I don't know if you've
mm.
researched that. The pub itself used to be owned
Neddy?
by sorry.
Neddy Smith?
Yeah, it used to be owned by by a guy called Bill Duff, who was Roger's partner.
Yeah.
Downstairs, I don't know if you ever saw that Channel 2 documentary Blue Murder.
Well, I wanted to
On,
ask you about the cellar.
yeah, well, the cellar definitely had a new floor, and it definitely had bullet holes in the
Oh,
wall,
dear.
100%. And it's funny because when I had my pubs in the country a few years later, probably from 2001 till about 2010, I had Pub Boy, and I started that famous tour that went around Australia with Rogerson, Chopper Reid, and
Ah.
Mark Jacko Jackson.
Mm.
And Roger and I became quite friendly. My Pub Boy Christmas parties were an absolute hoot. I remember I had this pub in Paddington that I turned into an office, and there was one Christmas party that was everyone who was there still talks about it. You had Roger there, you had Chopper Reid there, you had head of Bank West there, head of Westpac, head of the Banditos, head of the Hells Angels. Like you had all sorts there. It was
Mm.
awesome, and everyone in between. And it was just a really great vibe. And then, because in those days you had all the contacts everywhere,
Yeah.
in all sorts of businesses, but because you had pubs, and so you knew
Yeah.
everybody, you
Yeah,
were the
totally.
publican. These days, obviously, it's a little bit different. That's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
Did Neddy
Yeah,
own it or part
no,
own it?
Billy Duff had the license to it,
Oh,
and he
right.
was Roger's partner. Neddy would drink there, and who
Oh,
knows, maybe
right.
buried a few bodies underneath.
I know. 'Cause
Maybe he did. It definitely had a new cellar floor, that's for sure.
yeah, because I saw in an article too that when he was shot or something, someone tried to kill him, and
Yeah.
he fell over on the footpath in front of the pub, but he made it. He made it to the pub.
There was a lot of conjecture about whether it was whether it was the Iron Duke,
Oh,
or
right.
whether it was the I can't remember the one up the road. There was one they used to drink out up the road. I think it was called the Star.
Yeah, the
Um,
Star, the
the
Star.
Star, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, they definitely tried to run him over outside the Iron Duke.
Oh dear.
Definitely, that was about
Yeah.
15 years before I took it over. But yeah, look, it is definitely an interesting pub. But
It
these
is.
days, I haven't been in there in years. I don't know if it's not a hard man's pub anymore. That's for sure.
No,
That's for
it's
sure.
not. It's a very typical Sydney. I
Yeah,
wouldn't say it's gentrification. It's just a nice family sort of bistro
yeah.
pub. Speaking of, venues that aren't really playing music, I just wanted to ask you, Mark. They talk about it all the time. In the 80s, 90s, 2000s, that venues in Sydney are closing, and I've done a whole big thing about it in quite a few of my vlogs. The Sydney Trade Union Club, Hope
Yeah.
Town, all those venues. Do you think real estate and poker machines are the main reasons why venues closed? Or do you think as time goes on, the music's evolving, the crowds are different? What's your opinion?
I think of it like this. Look, I'm a different breed, right? I'm
Mm,
an old school entrepreneur. So to me, it's not necessarily about making money in the moment.
mm,
When we had the Iron Duke, we didn't necessarily make money
mm,
every night,
mm,
but you made money when you sold the lease, or you made money when you sold the property.
mm,
So I'm a bit different. It's like Golden Robot. I've spent
mm.
plenty of money on Golden Robot on the records, but you don't always make money from it. It's more about the collection of songs and the back catalogue that you sell one day.
Yeah,
So it's always a long-term play,
sure.
where a lot of people, they need to survive, and I get that. Everything needs to
Yeah,
work to pay their mortgage or their rent or whatever.
yeah.
So people look at things differently, and I remember in those days, what's his name from the Whitlams opened up that
The
in
Globe, I think.
the
Or the
Globe,
no, the
exactly. Yeah.
Sandringham or the
No,
Sandringham.
Sando was running. It was me. It was us, the Sando, the Annandale,
Yeah,
the Hopetown. The scene was thriving in
yeah, the
Sydney.
Vulcan. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it was some great venues. And then Tim Freedman, that's it,
that's
opened up the
it.
Globe.
Tim. Yeah,
That didn't last long because I think the rents screwed them, and I can't remember
yeah.
what happened. It was just a different vibe back then. And look, there's one thing I always say, and there's no dissing Sydney because I wouldn't own pubs anywhere else, but
Yeah,
Melbourne always had a different vibe. Melbourne pubs, you could put a band on at 3 in the morning and people would go to it. Where if there's a touch of rain, no one would turn up in Sydney.
yeah.
And that was always really difficult. So people had to have an alternate income. They
Mm,
had to have poker machines, or they had to have a good bistro, or they had to, which is not conducive to having music,
yeah,
and especially loud live music.
yeah,
So I think ultimately it's got to be a business, and it's got to work when it really comes down to it.
absolutely.
Unless I say, as I say, you've got a long term plan. I mean,
Mm,
these days, unfortunately, having a suburban pub with music, and as I said, I'm studying law and I understand the law pretty well, but even if you've got right of passage, meaning you were there first,
mm,
and you had your license first, and then they built an apartment next door to you,
mm.
you got to have 150,000 in the bank just to pay your barrister to hold them off, because they'll take you to the Land and Environment Court, and although you might win, it's going to cost you a fortune.
Yeah,
So, and even if you get costs back, you still got to pay for it.
yeah.
So it's just not conducive to live music anymore. I wish it was,
Mm,
but it's not. I'd still do it again though. If I could do the right venue, maybe in the country or something, I would do it again. I'd do it differently, but I'd do it again. But
mm.
that the Iron Duke was a moment in time, no doubt.
It really was. It really was. Even places like Salinas and so many great venues back in the day. I think the scene is still pretty healthy, as much as, we may not have as many venues. I really do think the live music scene is still healthy in Australia because there are venues still around. I mean,
Yeah,
the Metro in Sydney has been going forever, and they still
Yeah.
get good quality bands. And I don't know that you need that many. That you know, I know in the 70s and 80s there were a squillion of them, but that's
But you
because
also had a squillion bands touring.
yeah, and
And
people
and
didn't
and
people didn't have anything else to do.
And it's cheap. It was cheaper back then to,
Yeah,
the band getting in their panel van or their bus and going up and down. There
yeah,
was a lot of venues. You could go up and down the east coast of Australia and play in 30, 40 venues. You
yeah,
can't do that these
yeah.
days.
That's
And
right.
and and people are, people are going out in Sydney. You go to a chain of hotels that's owned by Maryvale, you're
Mm,
paying 10, $15 a drink, a
yeah, that's
schooner.
right.
You,
Yeah,
you know, even in the country, it's 8.50 a schooner. I mean, in
yeah,
my days, it was. I think it was 80 cents a scooter
yeah,
or something. Now,
probably.
obviously, I get things change and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but life's more expensive. However, it was completely different back then. So, as we've progressed with the times, we've got less bands out there, less venues, so there's less opportunity. And I know that for a fact because,
Mm,
I was talking to a band this morning who want to put an album out and wanted us to pay for the recording. Okay, we've done that a million times, but I said,
mm,
so where are you going to go out and play? Oh, no. Well, so you want me to spend my hard-earned money, never get it recouped because you're not going to go out and play? And it's, well, where do we play? We don't know where to play. It's like,
mm,
I couldn't even believe I was having this conversation.
yeah.
So I was just down in Melbourne, and I would say the Melbourne scene is probably the healthiest in Australia,
Oh, okay.
followed by Queensland,
Oh, wow.
and then followed by New South Wales. Definitely,
Wow, that's
definitely,
interesting. Yeah, that's really
definitely.
interesting. Tell me, Mark, about Golden Robot. I'm really interested in what you're doing with that. Like, when did that start?
Golden Robot came out around 2014, 2015. It was a direct byproduct of Jagger being on Australia's Got Talent.
Mm-hmm.
So Jagger ended up on Australia Got Talent. He was 9 at the time and he's 22 now. So he nearly won that. His backing band, funnily enough, ended up becoming the Preachers, um,
Oh, wow.
who did really well.
Yeah,
And so he was on the show, came out of the show, and I thought, well, I don't want this kid to be a novelty. I
yeah,
want him to have a bit of a legacy. So I wanted to put him together with a couple of well-known people and let's make an album.
yeah.
So I wanted to find Steve Albini, the famous producer. I ended up getting it confused and calling Steve Balby, who was in Voice Works.
Noise works, yeah.
Yeah, and Steve's a good guy, and we ended up becoming friends. And he went into the studio and recorded an album with Jagger with another guy called Mark Ward, who was the stalwart of the scene for years.
Yeah,
And they ended up making this fantastic album. They called it The Orbiter, and they called the band Moon.
yeah.
And if you look up Moon the Orbiter, look it up on digital, it's really is an awesome album. There's a song on that called Ronnie Biggs
Yeah.
that Jagger was 10 playing drums like you've never heard. It's
Wow.
still a brilliant album. Anyway, when I shopped it around, I went to LA, I went to New York, I shopped it around. I even knocked on Kris Jenner's door from the Kardashians to say, I've got the best album. You got to get behind this. There's a whole slew of other stories. I went around the world. I shopped it. Nobody was interested. I came back to Australia and I thought, can I swear, by the way, on this?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, fuck it. I'll do it myself. Being the entrepreneur, the light globe went out.
Mm,
So it went on, I should say. I'd given Steve and Mark and Jagger as a little gift when they came out of the studio. I gave them all a little golden robot, just a little statue. Was like size of your palm, bigger than your
yeah,
palm.
yeah.
Was sitting there and I thought, well, what do I do with this album? And I thought, I'll do it myself. What do I call it? And I called the label Golden Robot Records
Oh, wow.
and got a little bit of local distribution through MGM and put the album out. Didn't set the world on fire, but it certainly ignited in me. It was like with pubs. I couldn't have one. I wanted to have
Mm,
30.
yeah.
So I wanted to then either become a Gadinsky and collect all these bands and do an amazing thing, or it just, I would have just had fun. So I took it pretty seriously and, I got Rose Tattoo back from the brink. Angry was about to hang up his boots, and we ended up doing, I think, 5 albums with them, a few live albums and a few other things. Got them back going. Did an EP with the Super Jesus. I think we were involved with the Choir Boys. We did an album with My Sex. All these 80s, 90s bands that
Yeah,
nobody was giving any attention to.
yeah.
And then, so that started going really well, and we started making a name for ourselves. And then I got hooked up with an awesome guy called Derek Shulman. And Derek was the president of Roadrunner. When I was in LA, I used to do a lot of trips to LA.
Yeah.
I met Tracy Guns, who was the original Guns from Guns N' Roses
Yeah.
and the original LA Guns member. He introduced me to Derek, and Tracy was sort of involved in the very, very early days Golden Robot, and he introduced me to Derek Shulman, who was president of Roadrunner and had also been head of A&R for Atlantic, etc.
Oh,
And
wow.
he discovered everyone from Bon Jovi to Nickelback to Slipknot, you name it. He was behind these
Mm.
guys. So he helped me from 2015 to about 2019 get world class distribution, physical and digital. He opened some doors. He put me into deals with Skid Row, John Sykes, some really big bands. Some of the deals didn't go ahead, but some of them did. And it
Yeah.
really put us on the map of what we were trying to do. And then I just kept going with it from there. And then we've ended up having, plenty of number ones in America, number ones in Europe, worked with everyone across the world, in the
Wow.
States. And it's, I've worked with, we did solo albums with members of Guns N' Roses, worked with Filter and The Answer and all these great bands. And I changed direction probably 2 years ago. It was getting sort of to the point, it was almost unsustainable
Yeah.
where it was costing so much to run that I sort of went, well, we've had our successes, we've had our good things going on.
Yeah.
Let's make it a bit more boutique. So over the last few years, I've been running it a lot more boutique,
Yeah.
picking what we want to do. We're now with The Orchard, which is Sony, distributing our stuff across the world. So I'm really loving it these days because it's not the head fuck that it was.
Yeah.
Flying over to have lunch with Gilby Clarke from Gunners to Dizzy Reid from Gunners to
Yeah.
Rob from Metallica's wife did an album with us. Like all these weird and wonderful things we got involved with. But these days it's great. We still do Riley's LA Guns and Faster Pussycat, and we got an EP out next month. A single came out on Friday with Nick Barker and the Reptiles.
Oh, wow.
Stuff like that. Asteroid B612, we just did the album, like I
Mm.
said. I had 12 labels, and we've just sort of pushed that now into one Golden Robot, and I've got Robot Distro, and I'm signing 20 bands every week just to the Distro label.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yes, so it's good.
It's so refreshing to hear the passion and excitement that you have because, yeah, I just love that there are people out there that are really providing, platforms for up and coming and old, whether it's old or new. Because I've given up on radio. I feel as
I
though,
forget radio, it's a
yeah,
joke.
I gave up. I don't even listen to it anymore. I just have my iTunes or my Spotify or
Yeah.
whatever and YouTube.
There's no real
No,
support for Aussie music, and
no, no.
yeah, yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, no, thank you for the chat. It's been
Of
fantastic.
course, anytime.
I'm just going to end the recording, but hang on
Yep.
one sec.